So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight to the third steering committee for the Fresno Transformative Climate Communities Initiative. My name is Steve, or altogether Steve Rasmussen Kansian. I'll be your facilitator tonight. But before we talk business, I want to pass the mic to the pastor of the church where we are gathering tonight to thank him and his congregation for allowing us to make this our home as well.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to the Westside Church. Again, this is a wonderful part of Fresno to be on the west side. And let me again say we greet you, and we're glad to see you here tonight. We're grateful for your participation, your sacrifice and involvement in this great process. And my heart's been pretty heavy the past few days about what's happening in Texas. And my wife and I spent a lot of time on the phone. We have kinfolk in Houston, and we've not been able to connect with them yet. And then understand the hurricane is heading to New Orleans, where my wife's hometown. So we're pretty concerned. And so I was able to finally reach a colleague today, and I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Well, the water is rising, but it hasn't come into my house yet, but it's trying to get in," is what he said. I said, "Well, what can we do? You need some money?" He said, "Money's good." But he said, "We need more than money." More than money? I said, "I've been watching CNN, you know." And he said, "No, money's good. But what we need," he said, "is unity. We need harmony. We need togetherness. And when it's all said and done, we need that to build our community and to make it what we all needed and want it to be again." And so I thought about the process here, what we're going through, and again, there's been some money that has been, I believe, allocated to our city, and we're excited about it, and I believe that we're here because we know that we need the monies. But money is never an end in itself. Money is always a means to a desired end. Money helps to facilitate and helps us to achieve and arrive at our goals, but money is never what we're after only. We have dreams, we have visions, we have desires. We want to see things happen in our community, and again, money helps us to get there. So I believe tonight as we gather together, I appreciate this. I just feel a spirit of unity. I feel a spirit of harmony and oneness. Says really we're all after the same thing, for a better community and for a better quality of life for all of our constituency. I think I'm right about that. And whatever money we are able to receive is only going to help us to achieve that end. So I pray and trust tonight that's why you're here, because you want to see a better Fresno. Thank you for listening to me. And we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right.
Well, thank you, Pastor, for setting the tone. My name's Oliver Baines. I'm the council member of this district, and I really do appreciate Pastor Binion setting the right tone. I could not agree more that now's the time, if ever, Fresno needed unity and harmony. So thank you for that, Pastor. We really appreciate that. I want to welcome you again to our third steering committee meeting. Listen, this has been, and this is, quite a process. And I see many familiar faces. I've seen some of you all haven't missed a meeting yet. And I see several of you here. So listen, just for a slight recap, this is complicated stuff we're doing. It really is. It's never been done before in Fresno, and I argue probably not the state of California, the way we are engaging our community in this process. So it's complicated, and we understand that. We are doing our very best to make this make sense for you and for us. But rest assured, I had a friend of mine remind me today that the people that are experts that do this every day have a hard time understanding what to do with this process. So if you're feeling a little confused, you are in good company. We're all trying to get through it together. So I say that to remind you all that we're all going to get through it, and we're all going to get through it together. Now, why are we here today? Today, what we're going to do is attempt to learn how to put projects together. And many of you have heard me say before what this is about. It's never about a single project. TCC was never about a single project. It has always been about a group of projects that make something transformative and catalytic for our community. It has always been about that. But we don't really know how to execute that because we've never had to do that before. So it's tough, particularly when you have some pretty complicated state guidelines and trying to understand what cap and trade is and what CARB is going to do and AHSC and all of this stuff, right? So we're trying to make all this make sense for you, but we have to be prepared because in a very short amount of time, we're going to have to make some decisions that are going to impact our entire community for the foreseeable future. And again, we are engaged in this unprecedented community dialogue and process to get us all there. So tonight, we are not going to be developing projects, right? So if you have an idea, if you have a proposal, if you have a project and you need more project development, we are not here to do that tonight. And I wanted to make sure we all know that. I want to make sure we all know why we're here. When Pastor talked about tonight being one of unity, that's really what it is. We are going to learn how to put projects together tonight because it's not easy to do. And many of us don't think in those realms. We don't think like that. But if we're going to have a successful application to TCC where they actually fund us, we've got to begin to start thinking like that. We've got to start changing the way that we think about this process and how we put projects together. And you all are responsible for that. So again, if you have a project that still needs some work and you have some questions, and I would gather that they are probably really good questions. You know, we're going to encourage you at this point, unless it's a specific question of the local government like the city of Fresno or something like that, to make sure you are connecting with the state to get specific answers about your project. They do not want us interpreting the guidelines to you. They do not want us to do that because we may give you wrong information. So we're encouraging you to go directly to the state if you have a question regarding the guidelines and the interpretation thereof. So with that, I want to have Steve start making his way over here, but I want to recognize my friend and colleague, Councilmember Esmeralda Soria, who I also think has been at every meeting, I think, since we started this. And I did see my little bald-headed friend, Steve Brandow. He's somewhere around here, unless he stuck out. But I could have sworn I saw Councilmember Steve Brandow in there, somewhere over here in the room as well. So I wanted to certainly acknowledge the fact that we have a couple of other council members that are here today as well as former Mayor Ashley Swearingen. So with that, Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Councilman. So good evening, everybody. The councilman was very effective at covering the overview of the meeting, so I'm not going to repeat the things he said, except for to just remind us that when, at any point tonight, you're not sure what we should do next, this is all about learning how to package projects so you're prepared for meetings 4 and 5 when you'll do this for real. Remember how we've been talking about since the beginning that these aren't just community meetings. This is a steering committee that's actually going to decide what projects and what package of projects to recommend to the mayor. We want to make sure that when we get to September and we have 2 weeks to make those decisions, that we're all 100% ready to make them and be really confident that we had enough time and we knew enough to make them well. So that's really why we're here tonight. So does everyone have a copy of the agenda? And H, could you check if our translators could come in so we could check on translation? So we'll go over now. The agenda very closely cleaves to the goals that the councilman outlined. The first section, Danielle is going to go over the rules and the process for voting, the process for packaging projects, and the remaining steps. Because we want to make sure everybody has the same explanation of those, and also we have time to answer any questions. So we all have the same information we're all comfortable with the rules and the process. Then the second part, we're actually going to have our first vote. So could people who are credentialed voting members raise your voting ballot? So we'll explain how people got those when Danielle speaks, but those who are voters, we're going to have our first vote tonight. It's on something that's relatively minor, a change in the calendar, but it's really important that we get used to voting as a group. And if maybe there are kinks, we're certainly not perfect. We want to get those kinks out tonight, so at meeting 4 and meeting 5, when we're voting for real, we're all comfortable. So we'll explain the rules, and then we'll actually vote. And then in a moment, I'm going to go ahead and come on right. These are our 2 translators. I want to ask them each in the language that they translate to make sure that there's no one in need of translation.
Muy buenas noches a todos, bienvenidos a la Junta. Si alguien necesita traducción para la Junta, sí tenemos aparatos de traducción para asistir. Welcome everybody. If anybody brought a Spanish speaker to the meeting, please welcome them to come on down and get some translation equipment. We do have it available.
Nhớ rằng cũng bây giờ lo cười tụi muốn xả lựu, giờ thì nên lên thì xả tao, họ xả lựu nó lo thằng này lần chi của nhớ trong đó lúc họ trong sân đảo ở trong tao.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so as I say, so first part, explain all the information, the steps, make sure we're all comfortable. Second part, we vote. The third part is actually practicing the core of TCC, which, as the councilman said, is creating packages of projects. That's why you're sitting in half moons, because after several brief presentations by members of the committee, we're going to circle together in campfire circles, and with the help of your facilitator, you're going to create a TCC package using example projects and the rules of TCC. And again, the goal is to practice that, to get comfortable with it, to ask all the questions, so when we come back in September, you already know how to do it when you're doing it for real. Right, the last thing we want to do is ask you in an hour, in one night, to make $70 million decisions when you've never looked at the rules before or tried to do it. So that's why tonight is so important. Could I ask the facilitators to stand up just so everybody knows who your facilitator is? We have a facilitator? Yep. All right. Great, so you know, we all know who your facilitator is for your group. Then after you as groups create packages and also importantly articulate why you created your package, which we call local criteria. What are your local reasons for deciding what projects you selected for your package? We're going to place all of that on the back wall and have a group discussion about what are the patterns and differences in what people reported, and also what did we learn by doing it. Again, all to prepare ourselves to do it for real in September. So any questions about what's on the agenda, what's not on the agenda?
Thank you for laying out the agenda, because I understand the process, and I'm very glad for the opportunity to think through that. And you're right, I think I would have been very dumbfounded if I came the night trying to make these decisions. But I think there are details for me that I'm not totally sure when we're going to have the opportunity to discuss them. So I'm thinking about things like local hire, like how we're going to ensure prevailing wages, local procurement, those type of things that will have profound impacts for the people who are working and implementing and building.
Let me suggest that we should actually answer the question now. I think it would be appropriate to ask any questions, and we'll also list all the questions, including the ones we don't have time to answer, after Danielle's presentation. Right. So after Danielle's presentation on the remaining steps in the process and the rules, any question about, well, but when do we do X? Or when is Y? When can we get help with Y? We'll answer those. Do you want to add anything? Yeah, that's not, yeah, we shouldn't go there. We were talking right now about the agenda, and it's important. That's when we'll have time to answer all substantive questions. As the councilman said, we can't answer questions about particular projects tonight. That's for project development workshops and consultations with the city and the state, but we can definitely talk about like policy questions and when we'll have time to discuss those. Any other agenda questions? Okay, if not, just so everyone knows, there's bathrooms, guidelines, project applications, and food out the door to the left and the right. Does anyone have any questions about the facilities? We want everyone to be comfortable. Right? My partners, any other opening points you want to make sure to make? No? Okay, if not, let's get to it. I'll pass the mic to Danielle to start the presentation on the rules and the steps in the process.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. Really glad to see so many familiar faces tonight. It's really great to have you. So I'm going to walk you through a few things. I'm going to try to make it brief just because I don't want to shortchange the really rich discussions we're going to have on the second half of this agenda to talk about local criteria and also to get used to the process of packaging projects. So I'm going to walk you through the process of project development. A lot of this we've covered at previous meetings, so to a lot of you, this should not be new information. But hoping to make sure that there's just a lot of clarity and shared understanding about what that process looks like. And then we'll talk about decision-making processes, and then we'll talk about voting. Okay, so let's start with project development. And I have a clicker that is not working. Tracy, should I do this manually, or do you want to hit the slides for me, or how should we do this? There we go. Sorry, guys. Thanks, Miguel. There we go. There we go. I'm not very technologically savvy. Okay. So let's talk about project development. So this is a slide that many of you have seen before. It talks about where projects come from. So as we've talked about before, many of you are familiar with a lot of the local plans that have been developed over the last few years. So many of you I know have participated in the Southwest Specific Plan, as well as the Fulton Corridor Specific Plan and the Downtown Neighborhoods Community Plan. Each of those plans has a lot of different projects or project ideas that could potentially be relevant for TCC funding or qualify for TCC funding. Not all of them, but there may be some. So some projects will come through this process that come directly from those plans. And those are projects that have been vetted through many community meetings. A lot of the ideas for those projects came from folks in the community. Now all of them will be proposed. So if you see a project that's in those plans and it hasn't come through our system, then you should make sure it comes through the system. We're not going to submit a list of 50 projects from the plans, knowing that not all of those will get funded. Okay, so the other bucket of projects, we're calling other projects, and those are projects that come from you all, from the community. They may not be in the plans for a variety of reasons, maybe because it's an energy efficiency project that the plans didn't really go into a lot of detail on, but that has a lot of benefit to the community and is relevant from a TCC perspective. It could be affordable housing development. So that's where other projects are coming. Every single project needs to go through our online registration system and fill out a concept proposal. So many of you have already submitted your projects online. We actually have 96 projects that have been submitted through our system. We are letting people continue to register their projects all the way up until September 12th, which is our deadline for people to fill out their concept proposal application. So once you submit your project through the online system, you'll get a confirmation from us that gives you the link to fill out the longer concept proposal application. If you are an entity that is not necessarily implementing the idea, you just have an idea, but you might need the city to implement it, or you might need a developer to implement it. The reason why we're asking folks to register their projects is that we can make sure that ideas are connected to the people that can implement them. We don't want to let stuff fall through the cracks to the extent possible. It takes a lot of time to nurture projects and to make them successful. And we want to be able to nurture that, but it takes some time to do it. So try not to register your projects on September 11th, if possible. Earlier is better. One more thing on project development before I move on this slide. We have a map on our website of all of the projects that have already been submitted through the workshops. Many of you were at the workshops and submitted some great ideas through that. We're going to be updating the map with all the projects that have been registered. So you should be able to check back to our website in a few days to get a sense of what all the projects in the universe have already been submitted. And then you can take a look at that map and say, I really like this. I don't think I need to add anything more. I just want to make sure that those projects succeed, and I want to join that coalition of people that's working on that project. Or you might say, wow, this map is really missing this project, and I want to make sure that that happens. So check the map in a few days on our website. Okay, so once projects come through, what you're submitting through our registration system is just an idea. But that idea needs to be refined, it needs to be scoped out, it needs to have a budget, because when you fill out the concept form, you're filling out a budget. And it's a budget that we're gonna hold people to, because in this process, we don't have a lot of wiggle room to change things. So if you say, my budget is $10 million and I'm asking for 7 of that FTCC funding, it will be really difficult for our process to come back and say, actually, I only needed 15 million instead of 7 million. That's a difficult thing for us to deal with. So budgeting is very important. There are many resources that are available to help you with this process. So there's state technical assistance, and I'll go over that in just a second, and then the city of Fresno is making themselves available to meet with people on their project ideas for implementation projects. So finally, once you go through the technical assistance and you scope and budget, everything is due back into our system by September 12th, and that's a hard deadline because we need a lot of time to review and take things in after that. Okay, so this is not, as Councilmember Bain said, this is not the meeting to really go into a lot of detail about what can and can't be funded. There have been multiple state workshops that have been held here that have covered that. The guidelines are a great resource. So I would continue to sort of push you towards those resources. On the left, just a quick overview. This is everything that should be in an entire proposal. And if you go back to the guidelines, you'll see there's 10 different strategies. And so they want our proposal as a whole, the collective whole of projects, to include multiple projects that address a lot of these strategies. But then from a project perspective, they might fit on the right into one of those categories. So you might have an affordable housing project, and that fits obviously within the affordable housing and active transportation category. So key project resources, number 1, the guidelines. They were just adopted last Thursday by the Strategic Growth Council, and they are final, which is very exciting. And so the link to those guidelines is there, and those are the Bible for learning about what can and can't be funded through this funding source. We don't make the decisions at the local level. The state makes the decisions, and so talk to them. Daniela Simonovic, who many of you have met, and she was here at our last steering committee meeting, she is the key contact person at the Strategic Growth Council to talk about whether or not your project is eligible for funding. So I would make sure that if you're not sure about that, you talk to her and get on her list, and they also have technical assistance that they are offering for folks to help further refine their projects. Then fill out the project registration form if you haven't done that already, and then also work with others. And as I've said before, work early to get this in, because it's harder for us to kind of figure out how to help you if you come in late with your ideas. Oh, thank you, Steve. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go through our process and then voting, and then we'll talk about that. Okay, so this is a slide that also should be very familiar to most of you. We've shown it at previous meetings. So today we are at Community Steering Committee meeting number 3. This is our 3rd meeting. So our first steering committee meeting was the July 20th meeting, the one that was at the Californian, the hot meeting, as many call it. Our second steering committee meeting was here on August 2nd. Many of you were here. So this is the 3rd. We call this meeting the local criteria meeting. We have 2 more steering committee meetings after this, and those are in one's in late September and one's in early October. I'll go through a calendar in just a second. Our 4th steering committee meeting is really focused on taking the real projects that come through after September 12th and the ones that have met a lot of the eligibility criteria and doing what we're doing tonight, but for real. And so Steve mentioned this, but we're actually going to be putting that into practice. As you'll see when you go through the exercise, this is hard. For those of you who are grant writers, you know how hard it is to match projects into many boxes, and we have 120 pages of guidelines from the state on how we have to make sure that this fits into their box. So this is hard work, but we're glad to be doing it together. So after Steering Committee 4, where we do the packaging, then we're gonna go back and take all of your packaging ideas, put it into a couple of different alternatives, that are really truly viable, meaning that every alternative that is put together could actually be submitted to the state and meets all the state criteria. And at our last meeting, that's what you vote on. And that's a really critical meeting for obvious reasons. And that's really where the key decision is. After you all vote on that final package, and we get 66% of you, 2/3 of you, to agree on that final package, and that's what goes to the mayor, where he hopefully approves it and submits it to the state. Okay, so let's talk about voting. Many of you have pink cards. That's great. I'm really happy to see that. I think the last count I had on the list was about 240 eligible voters. So our voting is interesting and maybe unique to a lot of you. So as we've been talking about, anyone who lives, works, or owns property within downtown, Chinatown, or Southwest Fresno is an eligible voter, but you have to attend meetings. So we're using 93706 and 93721 is the way we define those geographic areas. As we've discussed and as you probably saw when you came in, where you live is a little bit more straightforward. It's your address, you know your zip code. Where you work could be a lot of things. It could be where your office is. It could be where the majority of your work is. So maybe your office is at Fresno State, but you do a lot of work in downtown or on the west side, and it's the majority of your work, then you could say that you work in the project area. Our intent is to be inclusive, and we want to make sure that people are eligible to vote as much as possible, so we're going to try to do that to the extent we can. We have a voter eligibility list that's on our website. Just a second. Can we get them on the speaker list, please? Thanks. We have a voter eligibility list that's on our website at transformfresno.com/process. We'll be updating that list regularly, but if you have questions about the list, make sure you talk to Gloria Myers, and she will be the person that answers your questions. Okay. So here's our calendar. This is what we have today. So again, today's August 30th. It's our third steering committee. Our call for project concepts closes on the 12th. As of right now, we have our fourth steering committee meeting on Wednesday, September 20th. We have project review day on Wednesday, the 27th of September. And we have our fifth steering committee meeting on October 4th. And what we want to talk with you about today and vote on is a change in the order of this calendar. So I'm going to go through some of the outcomes that we've already talked about and to help you understand why we might want to make that change. So I kind of went over the reason for the steering committee meetings. We have project review day currently scheduled between steering committee meeting 4 and steering committee meeting 5. But project review day is a day that we're going to use to make sure that everyone who submitted a project through our system gets to present their project to the public, answer questions about their project, and make sure that there's good interaction. So that when you as a steering committee come to these meetings, you are very familiar with what you are voting on. And we think that's really important to make sure you're all informed. We want to make sure that, in a 2-hour meeting, you won't have enough time to get a packet with 30 different projects and learn about them in 15 minutes. It's just not possible. So what we're proposing to you is that we flip some dates and do project review day before the fourth steering committee meeting. And the reason is to make sure you're very well informed about the projects before you do any more decision making about what those projects are and how they go together. So then what we would look at is just taking project review day, which is currently on September 27th, community steering committee meeting number 4, which is on September 20th, and flipping those dates. So then you would have project review day on September 20th, the fourth steering committee meeting on September 27th, and I put project review day. That's supposed to say community steering committee meeting number 5 on October 4th. So that's a typo. So that's what we're looking at today in terms of the vote that we would request from you.
Thank you very much, Danielle. So what we want to do before we go to our first consideration as a group is we want to answer any questions people have about the information that Danielle went over. We have a process that most of you are now familiar with. When you want to ask a question or make a comment, you hold up your yellow card with your name on it, so Michael can put your name on the speaker list. If everyone can be as concise as possible, we'll answer as many questions as we can. When we have to stop the questions, we then ask you to write your questions on your yellow card, turn it in at the end, and we will post answers to all questions on the website. So everything will be answered, even if we don't have time to answer it tonight. Okay? So we'll start with Bob, and if anyone else has a question, raise your card so Michael can put it on the list. Bob, go ahead.
I live in the Lowell district. It's part of downtown. It's clearly within the Cal and Virus Scan disadvantaged area, but it's area code 93701. So I've been excluded from voting based on where I live because you guys have made it easy for yourselves by defining the area according to 2 zip codes rather than making it more inclusive to include areas that should be part of the voting area. Now, maybe I can finagle a vote by the way I freelance at the hashtag, which is in one of the zip codes, but that's not the point. The point is I should be in this area just based on where I live.
So I'm going to ask Danielle to answer, but Bob, not to your particular situation. You should talk with Gloria Meyer, who's the voting administrator, but to speak to the general rationale for why we're using the zip codes we are.
Absolutely. We know that there are many zip codes that are included in Cal and Virus Screen. A decision was made early on in this process, given the fact that at the end of the day, our projects need to fit in a project area that's no greater than 5 square miles, which is not very large, to really focus on an area that wasn't too geographically large, which is why we've really tried to focus on 93706 and 93721. But talk to Gloria.
Again, our desire is the spirit of inclusion of the people who are most impacted. So take your case to Gloria and her assistants, and again, that as long as everyone's of good faith, we're finding ways to include people. Other questions? Do we have Lisa? Where are you at, Lisa? Lisa, you got it right here. Use my mic, please.
Once again, I'm very upset that my planning proposal got tossed today, but I'll deal with that through political means at this point. Just to let everybody know, I was going for a $250,000 Roding Park expansion project that wouldn't cost the city one single dime, and it got tossed because it was not part of the implementation, but I'm dealing with it. Trust me, I never go away. My one question will be, will the proposed projects be online for review? Also, too, in regards to the forms, you've talked about do it online, do it online, do it online. But if you don't have a computer and you basically fill this out by hand, who do they mail it to? And what is the cutoff date for mailing?
Those are all good questions. So to answer your first question, yes, we're going to put stuff online. First through the map, and then when we have a finalized list, we'll put that online as well. We're going to try to get people to go to Project Review Day just because I know, I agree with you. It's nice to read things too, and it's also nice to ask questions to the people who are actually building the projects. To answer your other question, we can make copies available at City Hall, paper copies if people want to fill out the RFCP that way or the project registration, and they would just need to mail them to City Hall, to Laura Gloria at City Hall.
And also, if you call Laura or Gloria Meyer, our voting administrator, we can also mail you something if you're not able to, or it's a hardship to come to City Hall. Again, we want everyone to have everything. That's our goal. Any other questions about process? Just to follow the procedure. Oh, you're right. Go ahead. You got a mic coming right there.
I want to know if your housing element is not in compliance, how do you deal with that? If your housing element for the projects that you're seeking to do, if they're out of compliance, how do you work that? Danielle,
so I think we'll get, initial information, but as a project question, I think it's also going to be really important to follow up and make sure you get the detailed information. Danielle, did you hear that question? Okay.
So what we will do is take in your policy questions, and we can work with the city to make sure that we get answers on those and post them up on our website.
And man, I'm sorry that I don't remember your name. Runa? Brunette. So are you also asking that if you're working on a particular project and the housing element isn't, so for that, make sure you should speak to Laura. Laura, where are you? Speak to Laura from the city manager's office, and she will connect you with the right people in the city. They may actually be here tonight, but if not, she'll connect you so we can get it resolved. And that would be true for any project-specific question that relates to the city. It would go to Laura. Any other questions about, well, we have a list? Oh, we got it good. So, how do I pronounce your name? Nujon.
So I want to thank the team for working so hard on the project map, but when I went to look at it, it took a lot of time. So I would like to request to see if you guys could list all the projects in chronological order in the district, so that way we can just go and look to see what projects we could align with. Thank you.
So I think we can definitely do that, and we can list them by type and also by geography, and we'll post those lists so you can look at it different ways. It's a very good suggestion. Lee, where are you, Lee? Lee, you can get a mic to Lee.
Hey, thanks. Steve, Danielle. We submitted 3 project ideas to be undertaken with the city and other partners. 2 of them clearly fall within what can be funded, urban greening and urban and community forestry. The third proposes a national park welcome center down near the high-speed rail station and some compatible attractions that would generate employment that people could walk to from the place. But I don't see the category under the what could be funded that would underwrite something like that.
So the short answer to your question is, if it doesn't fit the TCC funding categories, still put it through our system. And as you know, there are categories in transformative climate communities that can be funded with their funding, and then there are categories that cannot be funded with their funding that we have to find additional leverage funding to do that. And so what we've been telling people is you can still submit, just with the caveat that we don't have an identified funding source for it, and we're gonna have to work to do that, and it would have to be an approved project by the steering committee for us to find that leverage funding. That was actually a longer answer than I intended.
And so the non-short answer was, Lee, since it's a project-specific question, you should speak to Laura if there's city resources that can help, Danielle for initial information, and then she'll connect you to the right person in the state. Because we want you to get the best possible answer. So we want to make sure to get Luisa, Emily, and Kathy, and then after that, we'd ask people to write down their questions, because then we want to move on to our first vote. So Luisa, where are you?
Thank you. My question has to go to the local criteria that was referenced that the projects are going to be evaluated. And I know at the very first meeting, there was a bunch of stuff put on paper. And so if you could just define, or if we're going to do it in groups or whatever, you could lay out what is the local criteria.
Good question. So we will be doing significant work on that tonight in your small groups. The local criteria are really the reasons beyond what's in the state guidelines that you'll choose projects. And I think when you get a chance to do this in about 25 minutes, you'll see that the state guidelines aren't enough to make decisions. It's also about what do you care about most, what do you think Fresno or your neighborhood needs most. And we want to share those within the small groups and then within the larger group, so we can start to distill out what are the key priorities beyond the state guidelines that we as a steering committee want to follow. And that's one of our goals for tonight, is to distill out those shared values. Emily? Just get you a mic, Emily. It's coming right up.
Thank you. I noticed on, I forget what morning it was, that Channel 30 announced the funding of a project by Sylvester Hall. And I was confused whether this was part of this TCCC funding, because I thought there was a lot of process yet to go through.
Thanks. I'm actually, is Laura here? Yeah, I know it's not funded. I wanted someone from the city who could talk about what the technicalities of what did happen by the city council for that project, so that we're all clear. But no, it wasn't funded through this program.
Right, it wasn't funded. It's going through the process of annexation and a couple of things that they're setting up to be prepared for the application. So they're going through that process. It was probably in the news because it's a huge project, but it is just getting prepared to submit for this money. Correct, they are submitting, but again, they're just going through the process of the development process.
So tonight, when you look at your list of example projects, you won't see that project, because what's on the example list are not actual projects, they're mock projects, because we're practicing. But I'll point out one of the projects is a stand-in for that project, because Sylvester's project is one of the projects that includes State Center College, which is a big priority in the community. So if that project is to be funded by TCC, that's going to be first and foremost a decision for this group, and that will come up in the next 2 meetings. And so the last question, Kathy, is that you?
Thank you. Kathy from Fresno, Chinatown. I'm very concerned that from the first meeting when we were at the California Hotel, the question came up from many West Fresno residents in Chinatown whether or not our proposals would be funded fully out of the $70 million, since a decision is going to be made by the council and the mayor. And 2 weeks ago, there was an open public discussion of the council between Oliver Baines, Clint Olivier, Preston Prince from the Housing Authority, and the mayor regarding homeless housing, and that they should cut out some of the money from the $70 million for that project. I think we would need to be reassured that we have a chance at the full $70 million for all the projects to benefit all the areas.
Yeah. No, sorry, and just to be sure, this is a good example. This is an exciting process, and there are a lot of people in this room and people not in this room who are making proposals, are talking to other people about proposals, and they're not doing anything wrong. They're doing the hard work behind the scenes, but nothing has been decided yet because you haven't decided it yet. So you're going to hear about a lot of different people with groups of projects or a project that they know is going to get funded. Hasn't happened.
And this is Preston. So when it came to...
Preston, just wait one sec. I'll give you a chance. So the important thing to know is when you hear those, know that it hasn't happened and that all those proposals are going to come here to this room at the next meeting. And then what you as a large group and in small groups are going to decide which ones to fund and how to piece together a proposal that you'll then send to the mayor. But you're going to hear different versions of I already got the money from lots of people. And or hear that somebody said that, and like Preston said, they didn't actually say it. Again, it's going to happen here in September. Preston, what did you want to add?
Yeah, so just quickly, there's a lot of conversations about how to address homelessness, but we have never had a conversation linking TCC to homelessness. So just want to be clear. Yes, we're talking about how do we end homelessness in Fresno, which we should do. It's morally right, but we have not talked about it with TCC. So I just, want to reemphasize that.
Oh, thank you. And again, realize this is exciting, right? $70 million, so people are going to be talking, but it all comes back here. All right, so if there are any other questions about procedure, please write them in the back of your yellow card. Please turn it in at the end so we can answer it online. All right? So now we're going to vote for the first time. So I want to first ask our vote counters. I need all of our vote counters up front. Have they been appropriately identified? So vote counters, 1. You got this row. Where are my other vote counters? Come up, vote counters, please come up front. I need one more. I got 1, 2, and Laura. All right. So you were, all right. So first to make sure, so this is, and Laura, if you want to get the far right. And, huh? Okay, but okay, you guys know? Okay, great. We've got all our vote counters in place? Great. So everyone who is a voter is clear you have your voting card, right? So now the question on the floor will be restated by Danielle, and this is the question about the calendar, and then we'll take any comments from members, pro or con, on whether to make the change before we vote.
Okay, so what we are asking is to flip the dates of Project Review Day and our 4th Steering Committee meeting, so that Project Review Day would come first, and that would be on September 20th, and our 4th Steering Committee meeting would then come after that and be on September 27th. And this again is to make sure that by our 4th Steering Committee meeting, you've had ample time to review all of the projects that have come through the system.
So any questions or comments, pro or con, toward this proposal?
Just for clarification, is Project Review Day in the evening time as all these other meetings have been, or a full day?
Yeah,
It's an evening meeting.
just has a fun name, but yeah, it's not a whole day. Yep. Other, go ahead if you want to speak up, and then.
Are we, number 4 and 5, the steering committee meetings, are we voting on those meetings?
Are we voting tonight on those meetings?
No, like, during those meetings?
Yes. Yes, we will be. Yep. Any other comments, pro or con? Go ahead.
Question. Planning on submitting or have submitted a project on the format of the project review day. Are we going to give them some support so that every project's kind of on equal footing about what's being presented and what's the kind of venue and format and everything?
It's all being set up to make it maximally accessible, but let's not get into the details, if we may, of the day. Right now, just focusing on the calendar question. So we have Tate, we'll go right around the room. Tate, and then Sabrina. Oh, Sabrina, I couldn't see you. Go ahead, Tate.
Yes, if the change of the dates would cause a person to then be ineligible because they may have planned to be here on the 20th and not the 27th, what would be the impact there?
Well, we'd ask those people just to report that ahead of time to Gloria, the voting administrator, and you'd be covered. Let's go. We'll go around the room. Sabrina?
Yeah, I just have a quick comment about Project Readiness. I mean, this is a highly technical process, and can you speak to readiness and levels of readiness? Because what I hear is that if your project is not shovel-ready, then there's really no need to apply, or you can apply for a planning grant. And if that's so, then, and then my comment is, such a short time frame to create a shovel-ready project, unless you are a developer, unless you have been at this type of work for a long time, you wouldn't even have awareness about shovel-ready. And I just wonder that, how do you expect lay people to have shovel-ready projects to this capacity?
So I'm just, facilitator-wise, we're going to hold that question until after this discussion about dates, because I want folks to focus for the moment on the date proposal, and Sabrina will come back to it. So other comments, pro or con, or questions about the date? We've got Yolanda in the back, and then Lisa in the front. Yolanda, you want to go ahead and speak up? Yes, great idea. We will, and we'll live stream it, and we'll unlive stream it, and make sure it's available for everybody. Good idea.
I'm actually against changing the dates because I think that one of the things you have to realize when you're doing a project review is you guys are going to have to give enough staff time to make sure and go through every single project, and if there's any question, I don't think 8 days is enough. Because at the amount of time I get an email returned or a phone call returned, 72 hours, that eats up so much staff time of a 40-hour work week that I think that giving staff time enough adequate time to actually review the projects, see where there's holes, fill them up, so everybody can actually get a better sense of the projects would be better. And the only way you can do that is with a little bit more time. Just being a little bit more sensitive towards staff.
And this is good. This is a deliberative body. People should share other opinions one way or another before we vote. Anyone else want to comment, either pro or con, on this proposed change before we vote? Did I miss anybody? Oh, in the back, go ahead.
We won't go into a lot of details on format, but yes, people will be given really specific parameters on how much time they'll need to present, what they need to actually present.
And also, we'll support projects to make sure that the pros don't have an advantage. We want everybody to be able to equally share their information. Any other questions before we vote? Go ahead.
If you kept the steering committee number 4 for the day, September 20th, like she's suggesting, what exactly would you do during that meeting, since we haven't gone over the plans?
Well, what we would probably need to do is post everything online beforehand, and we would just ask that people would review projects beforehand, before they get to that meeting. That makes me nervous. Well, the 4th meeting, yes. I mean, yes, we would still vote, but you would have less time to basically be ready. Right.
On the votes that were casted and everyone else, if you got kicked off already, then you don't need to review your project?
The 4th meeting doesn't kick anyone out of the system yet. It basically helps us understand what projects are rising to the surface in certain combinations. So it's not like it doesn't create like a black and white list. So I don't think that would be relevant.
And I just mentioned it's a perceptive question, because the reason this calendar was originally created is before, frankly, we all understood this program. We thought what we were going to be asked to do is rank projects and create a short list. And we thought, oh, we'll do project review day on the short list. But that's not what now we understand this program. It's about, as the councilman said, creating packages of projects. So the calendar we created was when we had a different understanding of how this process worked. And we're trying to update it, if it seems reasonable to you, to match how we now understand the process. Any other comments before we vote? Go ahead.
Why are you doing all of this online? Because some people just don't have
Yep. All right. Very good point. So it's on us to make sure that anybody who asks to get everything on paper gets it. And so if you want things mailed to you, want the same stuff that's online mailed to you, please just get in touch with Laura, or Gloria, who might be outside, and we can get you on the mail direct list. On paper, right. You just need to make sure to ask us, and then we'll make sure to send it to you. Get on that list. So like if you'd like us to mail it to you, you can tell us now, not at this moment. Tell Laura, tell Gloria, and we'll get you on the mail list. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll let all members know. We'll also put that in our emails, because it's a very good point, that if you want this on paper, and then we'll be sending anyone who's given us a terrestrial regular address, not an email address, we'll mail them a notice letting them know if you want the material mailed to you, we will. The reason we're not just mailing it to everybody is because it's over 100 pages, and it'd be prohibitively expensive, so we're not just mailing it out. But we definitely wanted to get it to everybody. Do you have any other suggestions on how you think would be good to make sure everyone gets it?
Not necessarily that. Now, you just stated that it's over 100 and some pages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if a person even got it through mail, for the next due date, what is the 20th?
Mm-hmm.
That's not very much time, because you got to get it together, and then you got to mail it out, and then someone has to read all of this.
Yep, yes, no, you're very right. And that's one of the fundamental challenges of this whole process. We're working on a state timeline that's very tight, but it's on us. We will get the material to people online or directly. And what we would just ask is that people take the role of letting us know if you or someone else you know needs it on paper, and it's on us to get it to them, and we will. We'll make sure they get it the same time that people get it online. All right, so, and we've done that in other processes. But we can't do it to everybody, so we just need you to tell us if you'd like it directly in mail. So any other questions about this proposal, and then we should go ahead and vote?
In terms of time, looking at the numbers that we already have, we have 96 projects that have already been submitted. I mean, how are we realistically going to go through 96 projects on one day? Have we considered separating it into 2 separate project review days? Is that possible in the calendar that we currently have? And if we did that, how would that affect our next 2 meetings, if it was even a possibility?
We would love it if we actually got 96 projects that were eligible. We don't expect that they will all matriculate or actually come to proposal. And we expect that, unfortunately, a good number of them won't be eligible for TCC money, though they certainly are hopefully eligible for other money. So the project review day would be after that. First, people actually have to put in a full application, right? And then a certain level of screening to make sure these are eligible projects in order to make good use of everybody's time. And eligibility isn't determined by the city or the project, it's determined by the state. But you're right, if we get 100 eligible projects, it would be really a great problem, and we'll deal with it. I hope we do, but I don't think we will. Sabrina, did you have another question? Okay, yep. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our vote. So to be clear, in a moment I'll ask for those who are in favor, and that's in favor of changing the dates. And then those who are against, meaning you're against changing the dates. In order to make a change, we need a 2/3 majority of those who vote. Right? If we don't get 2/3, the calendar stays like it is. Is that clear? Okay. So now everyone who's in favor of a change, please hold up your card and keep it up until we call that everything's been counted. And counters, let me know when you're done. Okay, you guys are done? Okay, let your aisle know when you're done so they can relax. Okay? The center, keep them up until your counters say. Okay? Yep, okay. So counters add up and give us a total for the yays. Okay, all counters, you guys are done? People can, thank you. Hold on a second. You guys, I would put up the aisle numbers and then, all right? Or did you guys want to, I would suggest put up the yays before we do the next one. Okay. All right, so now everyone who's opposed to the change, please hold up your card and keep it up until the counters are done. All those opposed. And hold it up until the counters are done. Hold them up high so we don't want to miss anybody. Okay. Counters, you guys are done? Yep, you can put them down. Okay, so the results are 90 for yes, 2 for no. All right, so success in having a first vote. Thank you for participating and also understanding the need for a change. Let me just ask, any lessons learned about how that vote went, things you'd suggest we do differently? Any suggestions? Because we're all learning together, trying to make this work. Lisa? Great, good suggestion. Okay. Yep. Oh, I mean, reported the results by area. Yep. Okay, cool. Good suggestions. Any other suggestions? And let me say 2 things. One is, we thought about doing this technologically, and we might have if the technology was readily available, but we still also would have done it by hand. Because again, this is an assembly, not an election, and we want the voting to be social. We want people to see how each other are voting. Because more than likely, when we get to the end, we aren't going to get to 2/3 with one vote. We're going to have to talk to each other and find a way to come to agreement. So that's important. I saw another comment. Go ahead.
This is in reference to people that don't have internet or accessibility to technology to read the documents, and we'd just like to open up Bitwise and hashtag. If anyone would like to come by there and access those documents, we'd be more than happy to host.
Great, thank you. That's
and
great.
Transportation as well.
Great. Any other comments on the voting process? Okay, no, if not, great. Now, the goal obviously needed to make the decision, but also we all now know the voting process when we get to meetings 4 and 5 and we have really important votes. So do you want to just quickly answer Sabrina's question, and then we'll move on?
Yes, to go back to your question about readiness and shovel ready, this is a guidelines question, and to be really short, the guidelines don't require that every project is shovel ready. They require that 50% of the projects submitted hit their readiness targets. So as you'll see in the exercise, you'll get a bunch of example projects that have different degrees of readiness, and we've scored them. And the same is going to happen for the real projects that come in. So real projects will get a readiness score, and not everyone's going to be ready, but that doesn't necessarily count it out. So hopefully that answers, but we should talk more offline about that.
And definitely pass the word. If you're not ready, you should still apply, because not all the projects need to be ready. So readiness is not a reason to not apply. So don't let anyone be discouraged. If you're hearing, oh, I don't think I'm ready, apply, and then let's figure it out. All right, so now so we've talked about the process. We've done an actual vote. Now we want to jump into the work of creating packages for TCC. So I want to ask Craig, Tiffany, and Morgan to come up front. Craig, Tiffany, and Morgan are 3 active steering committee members from different communities within the project focus area. And what we wanted to do tonight is, before you as small groups jump into trying to figure out from your perspective, what is the perfect or the optimal TCC package, for you to hear from some different voices from the communities to get some ideas. You might disagree with all 3, but hopefully from hearing from different people, you'll start to think for yourself, what's your vision? Did you guys work out an order already?
Thanks for volunteering me, Tiffany.
To everybody's credit, this I think is a really good idea, but it's a really good idea that we didn't come up with until 2 days ago. So all these folks said, oh yeah, I'll do it, but it's not like they've been preparing all week and we gave them a lot of notice, but we thought that, why are we talking about this? It should be members of the committee. So thank you for being willing to jump in.
Thank you. My name is Craig Sharton. I am honored to work with the Downtown Fresno Partnership, and that is a property owners association, which means the property owners have taxed themselves and then have an elected board to oversee the funds that they collect, and then they hire staff and support the ongoing revitalization of downtown Fresno. So what I look at, and I've had a variety of experiences in revitalization, from elected official to city bureaucrat to restaurant owner to property owner to working with revitalization nonprofits all over California. So what I look at from my perspective is really what we tried to do with the downtown community plan and the Fulton Corridor specific plan. And that is to say that all of the surrounding neighborhoods are better when downtown revitalizes, and the reverse is true as well. Downtown is better when the neighborhoods revitalize, and vice versa. So I think of it as a ratcheting process. When downtown gets a little bit better, the surrounding neighborhoods get a little bit better. When the neighborhoods get better, then downtown gets better, and they become mutually supportive. So what I look at is projects that will connect to each other so that downtown and Chinatown and Southwest Fresno will have the most connectivity with each other. And I also look at projects that will take the economic catalyst of high-speed rail and help spread that out into our communities, downtown Chinatown and Southwest Fresno. I guess the other things I think about is we got 70 million. That's not as much as we need to completely transform our communities, so that we want to make sure that we are picking projects that are going to give us 500% return, 1,000% return, however we can do that, so that not one project just does one thing. If it's going to do housing, it also has to create jobs, it also has to expand the tax base, it also has to help improve our environment. It should do multiple things at once. So since we're funded by the property owners and many of our property owners have proposals, I won't pick one of those because that would be crazy, right? I have a lot of good developers with a lot of good projects. But I'll use the example of Mariposa Plaza as a project in the heart of the Fulton Street project that could bring in ongoing foot traffic on a regular basis through the use of festivals and musical events and cultural events that can not only help sustain the ongoing development of businesses and properties in downtown, but that also can play a cultural role in celebrating all of our ethnic diversity, our other cultural things that we like art and music and cars and you name it, as well as celebrating the foods that we make here and grow here and all of our recreation and all the things that we do. So that's why I kind of look at projects like that, again, that have maybe a financial impact, but also a cultural benefit and support our businesses as well.
Thanks, Craig. Hi, I'm Tiffany Mangum. I represent I have two different capacities. One, I'm looking at my boss. Can I say where I work? Okay. I work at the Housing Authority with Mr. Prince over there, but I also represent the Southwest Fresno Development Corporation. We're CDC operating here in Southwest. So mine is not quite as eloquent as yours. So when you're thinking of your packaging for this $70 million investment, I know, talking with some folks, we'd like to think comprehensively about the three communities that these dollars can really go into, and as well as far as connecting Southwest to Chinatown, and from Chinatown that heads into downtown. But some of the priorities that I'm hearing from our community folks include economic development, so some type of job or workforce training, which really comes into play with the West Fresno Center that's coming to West Fresno through State Center Community College District. Also access to healthy foods and farmers that are here in Southwest Fresno who grow food just phenomenally through the new systems and procedures. Permaculture is a huge one that's on the up that we're learning about. Also, with regards to responsible energy use and urban greening through park development, both
new parks popping up in our communities, as well as existing parks and structures that are already in place, investing these dollars into those that we need for our families and our communities, tree planting, urban farms, I think I discussed, infrastructure development and improvements, biking, walking trails and pathways, street and sidewalk improvements, as well as transportation and investment in our transportation systems and expansion and improvements. Specifically, I know in Southwest, access, specifically for our seniors, is a huge issue. And so we want to expand those transportation, access to public transportation. Also, housing is a huge one within the community. We're hoping to attract some workforce, some working families and working individuals to come into a community that has adequate housing to support them as individuals or as families. So if there's single family housing, that's one thing, but also multifamily housing, that is something that our working families can definitely come into. So those are just some ideas and some priorities that we're hearing within our community.
Hi, I'm Morgan Doizaki. I am with Central Fish Company in downtown Chinatown, Fresno. One, I guess, fact about Central Fish, Akira Yokomi Elementary School, which is not too far away from downtown, that is actually named after my uncle, which is the founder of Central Fish Company. So and so, I heard, I think it was Bob that mentioned the Lowell district, and there's the Jefferson district, and why can't we get funding from there and or for there? And what I've seen come out of this is the whole connectivity thing. And we have the mayor of Huron over here, Ray Leon, and he's talked about bringing, trying to connect to us. So it's if Lowell and Yokomi and Jefferson can find a way to connect to downtown or Chinatown or Southwest, this is a great time to look into that, because I've been talking to Ray about what he wants to do with his community. They have to it takes them 3 hours to get to Fresno and 3 hours to get back, and how can we help and do some sort of connectivity to even what I call, I guess, greater Southwest Fresno, because that includes a lot of other areas that could connect to Southwest and to Chinatown and to downtown. They wanted to come to Chinatown because of the history of Chinatown. We have lots of history in Chinatown. Kind of our history has kind of been lost a little bit, but we've heard about a lot of discrimination. We're on the other side of the tracks. What have they done for us lately? But the reason why there is a Chinatown is because I guess that we were moved onto that side of the tracks, and that history is there. So I don't want to say I've embraced it already, and I don't want to say I've moved forward from it, but I think that the city and I guess the times nowadays is kind of we're moving forward, and we really can't I guess be so angry at our past, but like in a SWOT analysis, you take every threat or a weakness and turn it into an opportunity, into a strength. So I believe that there's a lot of opportunity, and even though there's a lot of weaknesses and threats in Chinatown right now, I know they're going to close Tulare and Ventura Street. That's another fact, that they're going to close it down for 2 years. So the connectivity from Chinatown to downtown, I mean, our two main arteries, and that includes the west side, is going to be gone for 2 years. And I don't know how many people know that little fun fact. But for Chinatown, I finally seen, I've been in and out of this kind of politics stuff. I've been pretty dormant for a long time, but this has really rejuvenated me, and it's gotten the community really to get together. I think obviously here, with how many people are here trying to, I don't want to say protect their community, but wanted to do something for their community. And I don't know what packages are going to get bundled and what's going to happen, but all we want to do is find connectivity, how to work with each other. This is a great time to have meetings after meetings, because we're not going to bore each other out, because we're making really, really good decisions right now, and I'm very happy to be part of it. So on that note, I dropped the mic.
Well said. Thank you, Craig, Tiffany, Morgan. All right, so now it's time to get to work. So first, I don't like being up on the stage, but it seems to me that we should consolidate a little. So if you're sitting back in a row, which is going to soon become a circle, that has less than 6 people in it, you should move up and join another row, because we're going to work, these rows are going to turn into circles soon. So please move up if you're in a not fully occupied row. And then let me ask again for the facilitators of each row to stand up for a moment. We want to make sure we have an identified facilitator. Is any row without a facilitator? Is anyone noticing that your row has no facilitator? Okay, so Shelby's now there. Okay, any other row without facilitator? Eric, your row is without one. Yolanda, where are you? Yolanda, are you still here? Yolanda, can you go facilitate the row that Eric is in? Any other row without a facilitator? No, okay. So good, we've all got facilitators. Please grab a seat in the row you're calling home, so we're all in our spots. Okay, so grab a seat, and then I want to briefly go over the rules, and then we'll get to work. Okay, so, okay, go ahead, you guys can combine. It's a good thing to combine. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and refocus up front so we can go over the rules before we get started. So facilitators as well, go ahead and take seats now that we know who all our groups are. Okay, so everyone grab a seat. It's good we're consolidating, let's get it done. Okay, great. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to do the core work of TCC, creating packages. So I want to briefly go over the tools you have and the steps. You'll notice in front of your group on the floor, there's a map, and this is the map you're used to seeing, the map of the project area. Then you'll also, everybody has an 11.5 by 17 list of example projects. Does everybody have one of those? I'm going to go over it in detail in just a moment. You'll also see on your map that there are numbered colored squares. Each of these numbers corresponds to the number on a project on your matrix. You'll see in the upper left-hand corner it starts with project 1 and goes to 30. And you're going to use these squares on the map. So,
The way the projects are numbered on your matrix, it'll say housing 1, housing 2, active transportation 7. Those are the project numbers.
Project numbers clear, thank you. So in a moment, your facilitator is going to ask each member of the group to pick a project that you want to include. And I want to just briefly go over this list, not each thing on it, but how it's structured, so you can look at it and see what you want to include. It has 5 pages. Each page covers a different topic. The first one's housing. The second one is active transportation. The third one is urban greening. On each page, there's 2 projects within each neighborhood: Southwest, Chinatown, downtown. Those projects are intentionally different. So for, say, one of the housing projects in Southwest is market rate, one is affordable. Or one of the parks is large, the other one's small. We're trying to present all the different choices you have. So in a moment before you get started, your facilitator will give you a minute to look at the list and start to get familiar with it. These are not real projects, but they include the issues that we expect will come out in real projects. And so you'll notice, just as an example, go to page 3, or page 2, active transportation. Actually, I want to go. Did we put it in? So you go to page 2. Page 2, project 11. Does everyone see page 2, active transportation 11? Notice that reads that it's a 12, page 12, sorry, project 12, active transportation. That reads as a $10 million project to create active transportation connections to a future college and schools. We know there is a lot of discussion about a college project and making connections to it, so we've included a project that's like that. Notice importantly that it's not the college itself, because the college itself wouldn't directly be TCC funded. It's the part of supporting a college project that would be. And you'll see that throughout this. You don't have the names of projects that you know of, but you'll notice there's a project like a lot of the projects that you know are being discussed. If there's any project that you don't see is here in an anonymous form, that doesn't mean anything. We've just tried to create 30 projects that match all the key issues so you can discuss all those key issues. So in a minute, your facilitator will ask each person to pick a project that you'd like to include. And then the key work is, unfortunately, we don't, all get to pick our favorite projects and then get the state to fund them. We actually have to create a package of projects that totals at no more than $70 million of ask, that has 50% matched, $35 million of match, and that is at least one half ready. And your facilitators will help you through this process. It becomes a puzzle. First, it's what do we want, and then how do we fit what we want into these guidelines. Now, we're not actually here to count to 70 or 35. We're really here for the other things you see on this list: public health, environmental health, creating jobs. So once you've created a list, gotten it within the realm of the 70 and the 35, then as a group you also need to look at it and say, well, is it really serving what we want it to serve? Right? Because we're not just trying to follow the rules, we're trying to reach goals. Right? Then the last piece of this process that your facilitator will help you through is we want to get up on the wall, what do we really care about? Beyond what the state's requiring of us. Why are we really doing this? What counts as a win for us? So your facilitator is going to ask you to brainstorm out what are the reasons you chose what you chose, beyond that it just follows the rules. And then we're going to put all those up on the wall along with the maps, so together as a group, we can see what our local criteria are. And you've heard that phrase used. What that really means is, what are the reasons that we as Fresnans, I'm an honorary Fresnan for the moment, what reasons will we use to choose projects beyond just the official rules? All right. So Danielle, did you want to add something? Oh, okay. So your facilitators will provide you with more details. I don't want to take any more of your time. We'll ask any brief questions, and then we'll jump in because Danielle and I will remain if there's other questions your group has. And I'd say that the facilitators have valiantly volunteered to help with the process, but we haven't asked them to be experts on TCC. So if you have a technical question, Laura, Danielle, and myself in different areas can help while you're in your process. But your facilitators are there to help you through. You want to add something first?
Can our facilitators please raise their hands? Does every semicircle have a facilitator? Okay.
Great. So we had a question. We had a gentleman, and then we have, wait, but I think he had his hand up first. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, sir. So again, these are conceptual, but in the concept, yes. One of the reasons we're practicing is when you get till next meeting, you need to ask that question of each project. If they're claiming local hiring, what are they really doing? Because we know, like a lot of things, people throw around terms, right? But for today, this is a rare chance where you can believe what's on paper. Don't believe necessarily what's on paper next meeting. You want to make sure you know. Yes, thank you for reminding me to explain. So Unfortunately, readiness is a very complex topic under TCC, but fundamentally what it comes down to is half of the projects need to be at X level of readiness, and there's 20 pages on what X is. And the other half of the projects have to get there, but a year after application. So in a sense, the package has to be half ready. So what we've done is we've rated each project 1 to 10, and we'll do this same thing for meeting 4. And your collection of projects have to have an average of 5 readiness. So for example, you could have 5 projects that were 9, right? And 5 projects that were a 2, and that would be a 5, right? And 9 being high and 2 being low, right? Yes, right? But what's key is the 5, so you need to be 5 or above in an average. 10 is the most ready, yep. And this is real too, going to Sabrina's point. Part of what you're gonna be doing is, hey, we really love this project that's just a 2, so we gotta find another project that's a 10 to counterbalance it. And that's part of the game. Any other questions? Oh, I thought, oh, okay. Any other questions? Yep. In the future, we will. Tonight, it's just straight. Lisa? 10. Not for financial stability, but for match, you mean? So you notice actually that it's not different by neighborhood, though your important point that it's different. It is really different by project type, and that reflects reality, that some kinds of projects, like affordable housing projects, will bring a lot of match, and some kinds of projects, like most park projects, for example, won't bring very much. So part of, again, one of the challenges, if you want the parks without a lot of match, you have to get something else that brings some match. And that's part of what we have to do tonight. No, like, so here, let's just look real quick, because look at, it's not by geography, it's by project type. So let's look at page 1 real quick. Look at page 1 for housing projects. And look at number 5 and 6. Lisa, look at 5 and 6, right? And then TCC ask and match. Yeah, but just so you know that almost, so 5 and 6 in the Southwest have a lot of match. Those are 2 housing projects, right? And so do the 2 housing projects in downtown. But if you go to the 3rd page, are you looking on the 3rd page? Go to the 3rd page, which would be urban greening. Look at all the urban greening projects across have very little match. Interestingly, a couple of the downtown ones have some, and that also reflects some reality that we know there's some money downtown for those projects. Not those particular projects, but we know there will be. But all of the greening projects have less match. And that's a reality that we have to deal with together. We need to find match in the match-rich places to cover the unmatch-rich places. Do you want to add something?
These projects are not necessarily articulating reality.
But again, they are the real problems. So right? So they are, and this is a real problem. We can't, if we really. To be real, you'll see it. If we don't do some housing projects, it's really hard to make the match. That's one of the challenges. Yeah, let's go, okay? So note, your groups need to circle up like campfires rather than rows. So one group will have to move to the left and one to the right so you can get close. So let's form circles before you start talking. Of the distinct maps. So phenomenal amount of work that we saw happen in the room, and this is really the work of this project, what you guys just did. And you saw that it's very related to what we've been talking about for the last 6 months, but now we're taking it to another level because we're actually starting to map out the possibilities. So we weren't planning to have each group make a report. Rather, we want to ask everyone, take a minute, look at all the different maps, and then I invite anyone who sees a pattern or a significant difference that you think is important to recognize, because while these were experiments and example projects, they're very similar to what we'll see in terms of array of projects when we meet again on the 20th and then the 27th. So anyone observe a distinct pattern? Yes, low carbon, right? So not a lot of orange, interesting. Anything that people see consistently a lot of? Lisa? Spend money in the Southwest. All right, so cool. Anything, a lot of what? A lot of yellow, which is housing, both affordable and mixed-use housing. Any other things you see that are similar across maps? Chinatown is well covered, representing. Do people feel like, do the maps in general, do you see them covering all 3 neighborhoods? Concentrating more on 1 or 2? What are people seeing? I'm not looking on purpose, I haven't looked at it yet. Spreading the love around, right? Other observations? What else do people see in terms of distribution? Well, you're just pointing. You have to share. Any other? So do you see anything that's really different on different maps? Because we're just doing. This is the first time we did this. So you noticing, hey, someone did something different than my group. Okay, so notice that Group 9 had more housing the other side of the tracks downtown, well stated, right? So interesting. And again, there's diversity in the group. Does anyone from Group 9 want to share about that? You don't have to. Does anyone want to? Okay, but not. It's good to notice there is some diversity, right? And note, after the end of meeting 4, when we do this again, we won't be trying to come to one package in meeting 4. We'll be trying to be really clear about what are the alternatives, so we can bring them back at 5 and you can choose from the alternatives. So it's not some diversity isn't bad at this point because you want to be able to weigh the options. Any other patterns you see or anything that's different than you might have thought, Tyler? Right. And I think you can notice there's 4 housing projects here, all relatively high dollar. They probably have more match than they need, but they have relatively few projects. Other things you notice? Other observations like Sylvester's about how the process felt, or things you learned, or things we should do differently? Bob, and then Cass.
My group was 16, and each of us just picked one project, and we stopped there. We didn't even meet half the ask of 70 million. But we went way over on the matching. So there's plenty of room for more projects.
So it's interesting, and match is real, but in your case, it wasn't a problem. Right? And then Cassie, if I could see them.
We were group 5, and we did find that we were way under our match.
Oh,
Kind of did the same thing where everybody chose one project. But I think we were all surprised at how much money there was still left to be allocated after everyone sort of picked the project that was most important to them. So kind of, I think, opened our eyes to the fact that there can be so many projects done in all 3 of the areas to try to really work together and get everybody.
Hope so. We'll go around in this way to catch everybody over here.
Group 1, and we tried to hit all of the areas, we tried to hit all of the categories, and we had 250,000
Excellent. Wow, cool. So in a moment, I want to respect folks' time. So any observations about what we, the team, Danielle, Laura, H, and I should do anything we should do differently? Because we're going to do this again in 3 weeks, but do it for real. Anything you would like to see done differently? And we'll make sure to talk about that more at the beginning of the meeting. Without exception, these all work because we, most all of you have heard, our overall project area has to be approximately 5 square miles, but it's not a defined border. It's rather, let's say this was the final thing you voted on. It's not, but let's say it was. You draw a line like this around it, and that's the project area. So rather than create a border and fit stuff in it, we want to pick the things that make sense for the community and then draw a border around it. If it turns out there's an issue, that something's way out here, we'll figure that out. But all of these are naturally in less than 5 square miles. Any other observations of things we could, either that you learned or we could do differently here and then here?
Just when it becomes for real, I'm just requesting more time to actually do the voting.
Yep. Yep. And so one of the reasons we did this today is so next time we don't have to explain it, but we're counting on you because not everybody's here tonight. So next time when we do it for real, we'll be more succinct in the explanation and ask all of you as now veterans to help the folks who didn't come tonight. Because now we've got 150 people who've done this and they can help the others. So I have over here and then Tate and then Mrs. Curry.
So if possible, a little bit more detail for each of the categories so that we could really understand the difference between the 9 and 7.
And definitely next time we will add not only more detail but more categories, but phase by phase, definitely. And then, sorry, it was Tate and then Mrs. Curry.
Yeah, when we do this process, again, will we also prioritize any particular projects? Or of course, even see within groups what were priorities, because you could have 50 different projects, but it might have been helpful to know that everyone wanted number 8 or something.
Good idea. We can definitely add that. What we're imagining is we'll do this for real. Let's say we have 20 real allocations in meeting 4, and then in meeting 5, we'll attempt to bring back somewhere between 3 and 6 alternatives that capture all the patterns. Because then there's a choice to make, right? Because we can't vote on 20 alternatives that are voted a reasonable number. But it would be very helpful to know critical priorities, because then we make sure they showed up. It's a good idea. Mrs. Curry? So I would say the 2 process ways are make sure everybody who's an eligible voter comes to the meeting. And then in the context of the meeting, we'll make sure there's ample time, both in small groups and in the general group, for people to advocate. Because it is a democratic, I'll come back to you, Stuart. It's a democratic process within the group. So we won't make the case, but we'll make sure there's plenty of time for everybody to make their case. And I don't need to tell you what that answer is organize and get everybody here. Right? So happily, we have a very balanced group of voters so far, but we really need to make sure people attend. So I'm going to go Marissa, Bob, back here, and then we'll go around, and then I want to focus our attention over here before we run out of time.
for this project?
Yeah, so these are good, really good points. I'm gonna start to move us this direction. The key is, remember, you're not addressing me or Danielle, you're addressing each other, because you're the voters. And if you want those things to happen, you gotta get a majority of the voting members to do them. Right? So you should speak to each other, inside the meetings and outside, and you should make sure voters who you agree with come to the future meetings. So I'm gonna only because I gotta respect people's time. And Elliot, can you tell me what time it is? It's up to 7:56. So let's do 5 minutes of consideration of this wall because it's very important. And pardon me to the folks who have their hands up about that. I want to make sure we get some consideration of these. We will report out this wall both in photographs and in a matrix. So this is the compiled local criteria or reasons beyond the state guidelines that people made their decisions. And the height of a row represents how many people chose that. So just by example, this is local hiring. This is employment and jobs. You can see the size of the different rows. So do people have any observations either about what they see here on the wall or what they experienced in creating criteria? So you can see affordable housing and housing is probably number one along with, tell me if I'm counting right, local jobs looks like maybe it has the absolute most. Other observations?
Just wanted to add to the point about local hire and the point that was made about an existing project labor agreement. I think that to be specific, it's not just jobs, local jobs, it's what triggers that project labor agreement, how high is the threshold, what kind of local hire stipulation is there? Is it that people just have to live in Fresno County? Is it that they have to live in 1976? What's the percentage of people that's important?
Yes, it's very important, and also it won't be absolutely the same for everything. There's a project labor agreement. There will also be projects that might propose to do more than what they're required to do. So one of the key things about project review days is a great time to ask people about what their actual commitment is, because there's requirements and there's what people are committed to doing. We all know local hiring is the devil's in the details. What's local, who's getting hired? So ask those questions at project review day and get informed. I noticed this is a very high one. It is wider streets, transit, shaded pedestrian facilities, so it's multimodal transit and connections. Did any group have experience of discussing that? Anything you want to add to the tall list? So I'll repeat the point. So the question was, did you notice that there is some notes of retail, but maybe not as many as you'd say would reflect the real need for retail? And then ask the question, what kind of retail? So I think the important thing here is to recognize standalone retail is not fundable by TCC. It's fundable within a mixed-use housing project, and most likely a mixed-use housing project that's connected to high-speed rail or to other resources that are TCC eligible. So think about that. What do you want, and how do you make it TCC eligible? Because grocery store, not TCC eligible. Grocery store with apartments on top of it next to high-speed rail, very eligible. So you got to think about how to make what you care about highly eligible. Other observations about the reasoning, Bob? That goes to Craig's comment earlier of catalytic projects. You might not be able to fund something, but if you can make it more likely to happen by something you fund, you might still be able to affect it. Any other observations about local criteria, Lisa?
I know in group one of the things that we mentioned is that we want to see a lot of the money spent in the Southwest.
So please, please, please remember, the more talking to each other, right, we don't get a vote. And that's a decision for you to group to make together how you allocate those funds. Any other, I want to respect folks' time and stop in 2 minutes. Any other comments? So I'm going to, any last hands, we got one here. Just so you're going to have the last word of the group, but please, we're staying here. Please come up and look more carefully at all the maps and the list. Remember critical dates. The 12th is when all proposals need to be in, so if you're working on a project, talk to, if you have city questions, Laura. If you want to make sure you're connected to the state, Danielle is not the state, but she can make sure you get connected, right? And then the 20th of September and the 27th of September, and I want to make sure I'm adding right the 4th of October. Put them on your calendar and make sure you'll get all of them right here in our home, courtesy of Pastor Binion. So, sir, final word.
My passion is behavioral health in communities of color, families of color, and I noticed in the public health that it's kind of lacking. And hopefully, next time we come together, we can think about public health a little bit more in terms of the funding and having it in the communities that we need.
And I think on all the substantive concerns, today we intentionally made sure everyone got comfortable with $70 million, $35 million readiness. But that's not why we're here, right? We're here for public health. We're here for environmental justice. We're here for getting the retail that isn't here, the jobs. Now that we are comfortable in the constraints and actually finding that maybe we have enough money to do all the projects each person chose, now we need to, well, how do we make them more than just a project? How do we get public health impact? How do we get environmental impact? How do we get truly local jobs? So thank you everybody for staying for an extra 15 minutes, and look forward to seeing you on the 20th and seeing your proposals by the 12th. Thank you very much.